Hey you guys, thanks for clicking on the video. I'm back. I've been busy for a few weeks, but I'm anxious to get back on here and get some content out for you guys. I have a lot to catch up on, and as promised, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Oh my God. And I do a lot of different topics on the channel. I don't just have one niche. But, when I catch some time, I'm trying to go back and complete earlier projects. And as I once mentioned to you guys while I was putting out videos on the Watts murder case, I did a series on people bashing Shanann Watts and her family. And I did mention that I would get out a video concerning Cindywatts. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. I want to get into a little bit about Chris's childhood and kind of take a look at his mother, at Cindywatts, and how she kind of factors into this whole thing, okay? If you're familiar with the Watts case, then you'll know what I'm talking about. It happened in August of 2018. Chriswatts murdered his pregnant wife and his 2 baby daughters. And a sort of shit show ensued in the aftermath of rumors and speculations and different accusations flying everywhere, and blaming the victim, and going after her family, and just all kinds of things in the last 3 years since this happened, or is it 4? And so there's a lot of information out there about this case. And I just, certain components of it moved me very deeply, and I have felt moved to speak on a few of those. And so, either things that I could see something in and felt like maybe I could contribute some perspective to, or something I may have felt strongly about, like the bashing of Shanann. That's just freaking uncalled for, her and her family. And so, as I always say, my videos are simply for educational, entertainment purposes only, just for the sake of discussion, some perspective, whatever. I'm not telling people to take any actions, or, I am not trying to brew hatred, really. That's not, even though in some of my videos, just depending on my mood, what I'm dealing with at the time, what I'm speaking about, sometimes in my videos, I do have a certain intensity. I do have a certain anger that I'm expressing behind that. It just depends. Not always. But that's really not what I'm going for, okay? I could care less about all the drama and all the crap on YouTube and inciting rage and anger in people. I just want to examine things and provide a little bit of perspective. Anyway, okay, let's get into it, guys. If there's one thing I know something about, it's toxic mothers. Whew. And not just my own, but through the years, having dealt with other people's mothers and other involvements of mine and friends, and sort of listening to them and helping them through things with their mothers, and whoo, Lord. So, okay, Cindywatts. We're going to take a look at Chris Watts' mother and talk a little bit about her. And kind of go back into his childhood a little bit and how this all factors into leading up to the perfect storm in his head, shaping his mind and his life, and how this all came to a very devastatingly gruesome, tragic end. For a lot of innocent people, and it brought pain to a lot of people's lives. Okay, so from what we've seen of Cindy, we've picked up on her demeanor in interviews, telephone calls. Things have been made very public in this case. Her phone calls to Chris in prison have been recorded and made public, a lot of them. We've picked up on a lot of Cindy's attitude, right? Just from public interviews, phone calls, videos out there. She did put out a book called All My Broken Pieces. I don't have a copy of it, but I've listened to it. I've listened to it broken down piece by piece. And so, and just from also witness accounts we kind of can catch a vibe on Cindywatts. We've seen what we've seen. And, we've noticed, in interviews, she takes any chance she can get to harp on about how much she hates Shanann, Chris's wife, that he murdered. That's pretty much what Cindy does. We catch the vibe on her pretty quickly that she's an emotionally immature woman. And, in these interviews, a lot of the time she's not showing any type of love or respect or compassion even in her tone and what she's coming across like for the victims, for her granddaughters at least, at all, for any of the victims or their families. She's not really exhibiting any of that. A lot of times in her interviews, it's all about poor, pitiful her, how badly Shanann treated her, and her son, which her son, she's so highly narcissistic to me, we can all clearly tell it, that her son is really not even her son. He's just an extension of her, just another her, whatever she wants him to be. But yeah, that's kind of the vibe that we've all gotten off Cindy, is that's all she really cares to talk about. There doesn't seem to be much emotional depth there with her, and looking at this whole thing with some empathy about how other people are feeling, how the victims' families must be feeling, what's really going on here. It's just typical of a high-level narcissist, all about Cindy. And so we have seen this demeanor, and it's a very odd demeanor for a mother-in-law or a grandmother who has lost people in such a tragic way. I mean, and yes, people cope with loss and tragedy differently. I understand that. It's not uncommon to see people go into denial a while. It's not uncommon to see people speak on lighter topics to avoid thinking about the tragedy. And I'm referring to how we also see Cindy and Jamie in visits with Chris and in phone calls. We hear them laughing and joking and and again, I'm going to say it's not uncommon for even the most normal of people to, after a major tragedy, go into shock and not want to cope with it, to want to make jokes or cut up, to ease that anxiety and pain. It's not uncommon. But the healthy thing to do would be, of course, plan to deal with that grief later on. But, if this kind of thing goes on too long, it can be very toxic because they aren't coping with reality at all. Okay? And, I've had to go through this with people. And so I understand that a lot of people deal with tragedy and anxiety and pain by making jokes at really appropriate times, by making light of everything. But I can only tolerate so much of it. Now, I understand sometimes when people have to do it. I have to understand that everybody copes differently with things. But after too long, it really starts to trigger me, and I don't fucking like it. I don't tolerate it. I don't appreciate it. Because I'm a person that after a while, I may have to go away too for a little bit and not cope with something too heavy for me. But I'm the kind of person that has to come back and face things. And, after being around my family growing up and my mother who kind of turned a blind eye to everything, I just do not like denial of any kind that goes on for too long for any damn reason, because I know it ends up hurting people in the long run. So, I'm saying it's normal sometimes to see people not coping and acting goofy after a tragedy. That can be a normal psychological response to shock and pain. But if it goes on too long and it goes way overboard, there are some other issues there, and it can turn very toxic, okay? And it can lead to negatively impacting others who may want or need to face things in order to heal. It's really difficult being around someone in denial 24/7, okay? You just can't grow. You can't face things. But no, it's not unheard of, and it doesn't instantly make someone toxic if they just do not or cannot face the enormity of a tragedy right then. I totally get it. And some people never get to properly grieve or heal from certain things. They just keep carrying it. It's in there. Yeah, I've observed different people in my life, different types of grief and ways in which they grieve. You know, I've had my own, you know, losing my father and losing people in my life and brothers. My mother lost 2 sons and my father after knowing him since she was 16 years old. My sister's baby was stillborn back in 2018. My boyfriend lost his 14-year-old child back in 2016. And everyone in these cases had their own way of coping, you know, in different ways. And it's hard because we want to be understanding, you know, but when their lack of ability to somehow find a responsible way of coping with their loss, it starts to be self-destructive or causing others around them pain, then it's just going too far, okay? We want to understand people's need for denial sometimes and be understanding of that. But if they carry it on too long, if their grief becomes self-destructive or just total denial for too long, then it's going to start fucking with everybody else around them. It's going to start negatively impacting, and it's just going too far. And I feel like even in our deepest of sorrows and grief, we still have a responsibility to try to cope with it, you know, as much as we can, not to hurt or affect others, okay? And with Cindywatts, we, like I said, we constantly see this absolute hatred. This is kind of where we see her grief going. It's all we see of her grief. Constant hatred for the victim, her daughter-in-law. And an almost absurd, delusional type of denial when she speaks of her granddaughters who were murdered by her own son. You know, and I know the enormity of that, facing the fact that your own son did this with his bare hands. Yes, it would put someone into shock. It wouldn't be abnormal for the family to not be able to cope with that for a while. But I think there's a lot of other things at play with Cindywatts. Absolutely. And she speaks almost as if they were accidentally killed in a car crash or something, okay? I mean, so, like, she speaks almost like they were killed in a way that had nothing whatsoever to do with her son. She and the sister Jamie, like I said, they just laugh and go on jokingly with Chris, and they mentioned, you know, they talked about how the funeral services went, and, oh, you know, when the CD player skipped, we just knew that was Cece. We just knew that was Cece from the afterlife messing with that CD player. And I'm like, the fuck? Like, it's just not appropriate, okay? It just, and I know a lot of other people have the same feeling. It's like, okay, unable to cope or not, grieving grandmother or not, whatever the hell, it's just not appropriate. These little girls were viciously murdered by your son, okay? And yeah, a lot of people are not taking too kindly to her whole attitude and demeanor about this. It's not a joke. They weren't killed in a car crash. Their lives weren't accidentally lost or taken, or, you know, no. They were killed at the hands of your son. And so, I mean, you know, like I say, I get it that normal people act oddly when they're in grief and shock. Sure. They joke and whatnot, and it eases everything for them, but what I mean by, I don't know, it's just a weird thing with her. Meets the eye with Cindywatts, more going on with her. I feel like it's more than just classic denial because she's in shock from the murders. You know, of course, any normal person would be in shock that their own son could do this. They may cope in any number of ways, but I think it's much deeper rooted with her. What I meant by that is that admitting this, not only is it shock and grief, but admitting this to herself would shatter the narcissistic image that she keeps of her son. Okay, we're going to get into all this stuff later on. But facing reality with him, I don't think she's ever seen Chris for who he really is. That's what we're going to get into later. This goes way, way back into his childhood. So for her to see him, you know, for what he really is in today's time, what he did, she would have to shatter. You know, highly narcissistic people keep a Photoshop, a photocopy, a fantasy, a projection, something in their head of all the people around them, even their own children. We are not individual humans. They don't see us. They don't hear us. We are not us to them, okay? And for her to have to admit what he's done and speak to him on a realistic level, that would shatter the narcissistic golden boy projection that I feel like she's always put on him. Chris is, it's all very, very psychological, multi-layered, deep-rooted. But yeah, that's a part of it. We're going to get into more of that coming up. I've also seen all kinds of other psychological techniques used by normal people in shock in an attempt to cope. So, you know, it just depends. But this demeanor of hers, added together with all the other characteristics and stunts that she's pulled, to me, it just indicates that Cindywatts is extremely toxic, okay? And I know there are many people who will disagree. You know, there's that whole set of people that just say she's a grieving grandmother and mother, her son's in prison for life, and she's a loving person in grief. But no, that's not what I get from Cindywatts at all. It's just not. So let's take a look back a little bit into Chris's childhood. You know, there are not a lot of details about his upbringing. There have been just a few made public that I've heard. You know, as far as he was a good boy, he was never rebellious. And we know that Chris has one sister, Jamie, so it was just the two of them. And we know that Father Ronnie at some point had a struggle with cocaine use. And I believe I will see Live Abuse Free. I'm very fond of her channel. She gives a fantastic, well-informed breakdown on this whole entire case and the dynamics of it and back into Chris's childhood. And I've also heard this in other places. Chris, in an interview, spoke about how his sister Jamie was more of a mother to him than his mother. She was more mothering to him than his mother. Okay, and he said this, and now he didn't really, that I'm aware of, elaborate any more on that. I don't know what that meant. I don't know if that was because she was working all the time and Jamie, the sister, had to pick up the slack, or I don't know if it meant because of Cindy's personality, that she was just not a very loving, nurturing, comforting mother who was really attentive to her son. But from all the other things that I've gathered about Cindywatts, that's really what direction I think it's pointing in. So he did say his sister was more of a mother to him than his mother. Okay. So I know that I grew up with a mother who was not very nurturing or motherly or comforting that way, understanding of me and my needs, paying attention to me. My father was actually the one who was more loving, nurturing, and motherly towards me, but at the same time, he was also the most abusive, violent, cruel, manipulative, physically, emotionally, and otherwise abusive man, you know, so it was very confusing for me growing up. But I know what it's like to have a mother like that who, you know, isn't very nurturing or tuned in to really caring about me, really seeing me and being there for me. A detached mother, you know. In early childhood, what that can do to a kid's brain, it can affect you for life. And it can affect all of your adult relationships as well if you don't get into therapy or counseling. So I think there's a lot of things at play here in the Watts family, in the Watts case. But, you know, thank God I was put into places that could help me early on. I had a therapist for many years. But even so, I still had plenty of mother and father issues to work through, and I still do. Even with all that help, And some grow up in weird situations, and dysfunctional situations, abusive situations, and they don't get any therapy. They go years being treated or programmed a certain way and nobody to ever intervene to tell them it's wrong. They just grow up like that. And a lot of times kids are scared and ashamed, fearful to cross the family, to reach out for help from someone or even know that they need it. When you're raised like that, you don't know any better for a lot of years. You don't even know you need help. You don't even know you're being damaged and programmed a certain way. And some may be living with abuse and neglect, like I say, that they in their young minds don't even realize is abuse. And it's setting them up for future struggles in relationships and life. I personally ran away. I started running away at a real young age, and this, of course, attracted the attention of Child Protective Services, courts, and I also spoke up. I turned on my father. When I got old enough to realize it was wrong, I was one of those kids that had a fierce determination inside. I wasn't messed up about turning on the people who raised me or what I was born into. It had to be done, and, but a lot of kids get caught in that emotional conflict of not wanting to hurt their family, not wanting to hurt the abusers. It's complex when you're raised in abuse and trauma and mistreatment. You still love those people, that they're all you have, and you may go through. But I didn't back then. I gotta get out of this. This has to be done. Naturally though, I loved them, but I was pretty defiant and I wanted out, and I called in help. But, it's different for all kids born into trauma. I've always had best friends and other people in my life who have all had some similar issues with toxic or abusive families growing up, and many of us have done lots of sharing and emotional work together, learning from each other, sharing experiences and helping each other grow through that and heal. Some are fiercely loyal to their abusers, to the family secrets. Some people are, even into middle age, they just will not, and I too, I was pretty brainwashed by my father for a long time. Oh yeah, that happens in toxic families. They want you brainwashed and controlled and thinking a certain way. And I was taught to be fiercely loyal to him, the abuser, the addict. Absolutely. That got into me. Toxic families are big on keeping secrets, being private, keeping things private. We don't talk about things in our family. We don't talk about feelings in our family. If you hear that from someone, to me, that's a damn warning sign, okay? I always get prickles when I hear that. We didn't talk about feelings in our family. Or we don't talk about things like that within our family structure. Oh shit, you know what you're walking into then. I mean, really, it's just that way. And we've heard Cindywatts say, I believe it was in her book, All My Broken Pieces, and I've heard it broken down, reviewed many times, that upon meeting the Ruseks, Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandra Rusek, when they all got together to meet, I believe it was the first time they were going to have a cookout or whatever, and they met up at Shanann's house. And at 25 years old, Shanann had worked her ass off. When she met Chris, she had a really big, beautiful home that she had bought. And Sandy and Shanann seemed very outgoing. This is what Cindy made remarks about Shanann's family upon meeting them. Sandy and Shanann seemed very outgoing and willing to share and tell things that Cindy, would normally keep private. They were very open about family struggles, personal things, and Cindy spoke very judgmentally of this. Like they were bad people for having this openness, okay? For being so open and sharing. Okay, stop right there. Right there, okay? The Ruseks were warm, open, accepting people who had nothing to hide. They had no secrets to keep. And oftentimes really authentic people come across like that, okay? They weren't covered in toxic shame about whatever family flaws and mistakes they had. They were also trying to relax, be relatable, be open, and connect to Cindy and the Watts family, okay? And yes, it's perfectly fine and normal if a person prefers more privacy and not to openly disclose flaws, failures, mistakes. Yeah, many of us don't. Many of us don't want to share that. That's okay. There's nothing abnormal about it. But for the most part, that tells me something about the character of people like that right then and there. I personally operate that way as well. I don't have any shame about, I'm a pretty open person like that because I'm confident in my growth. If I did make mistakes, whatever I did in my past, whatever terrible things I might have been or thought or gone through, I'm pretty confident in continuing to grow and heal and make changes to that. So I can speak openly about those things. And it tells me a lot about the Ruseks family, that they're on a certain higher level of emotional intelligence, that they cope with and handle family flaws, mistakes, failures with responsibility and integrity, with fairness, love, and acceptance. And they don't bury things and keep secrets, cover-ups, pretend to be people they aren't, sweep things under rugs, or put on airs. Teach their children not to feel, not to discuss feelings and problems. That's what it tells me about the Ruseks. Not to just store it, stuff it, bury it, therefore creating massive shame inside. Volcanoes of repressed emotions, anger, resentment, and guilt. That's what happens when you teach children to stuff and store feelings, not to know their honest feelings. When you teach them not to know what they're really feeling, to just bury things, it's creating massive shame and literal explosions of repressed emotions inside of that child, and it will continue to grow. So just from the two families meeting and what Cindy had to say versus how Sandra and Shanann's family acted, okay? Plus all the other stuff we know of Cindy, yes, this is exactly what it indicates to me. Toxicity in the Watts family. Very toxic. Toxic families, people in general are always uncomfortable around new people coming into the family. But toxic families especially do not like it. Right off the top. Controlling narcissistic mothers or fathers will get very triggered by the new relationship partner of their child. Yes. And find instantly things to judge or dislike about them. I mean, it's classic. It's just classic. Cindy followed classic pattern of a toxic, narcissistic mother, instantly finding things to dislike about the new girl in her son's life. Because highly narcissistic parents are not emotionally mature. I don't care if they're 65. They're used to having a certain type of relationship and exchange with their grown child. Control, manipulation, or power over the grown child. And that child gives them the narc supply that they need. Worships mommy over all others. Mommy's the best. They have some kind of secret, toxic, sick energy tie there. It's weird. And yes, many toxic strings are going on in these types of situations that others will never know or see. These types of parents never basically got stuck. They never grew up in certain ways, okay, mentally and emotionally. They rely on the relationship dynamics with their grown child to feel good about themselves. That's what narcissism's all about. People using other people to get their self-esteem, to feel good, using others, okay? Other people are just objects, or to feel at all in some cases. But, yeah, guys, I've got a lot to cover on this particular part of the case to do with Cindy and Chris's childhood, so this probably will be split into two parts. I'm trying to be careful about how long my videos get. I've got a lot to get out about this, okay? But yes, oh my God, and when bright, shiny, strong, assertive, successful Shanann came into Chris's life, when a new partner comes in, especially when they're like that, into the grown child's life of a narcissistic mother, you talk about triggered. They are instantly triggered. All of those feelings inside, because a narcissistic mother is not very emotionally mature anyway. She relies on everyone else for her self-esteem and the son, and so this is a big threat to her. All this is going on, okay? And people don't even realize it. Very threatened. You know, and I've experienced, had certain experience with things like this. You know, most of the people that I dated, and I was married twice, I got on really well with most people's mothers, okay? I mean, yeah, I had tattoos. Yeah, I had anxiety and some emotional struggles. But for the most part, when I was dating someone or married, I tried to be good to and for those people and extremely loyal, even though I wasn't perfect. Most of the time, you know, my personality, I got on really well with most people's mothers. But there was a time or two where I encountered someone's mother that took an instant dislike to me. And as it turned out, that whole family was extremely toxic. They all had issues. And there was nothing I could do. It wasn't even about me. She was but I began to learn. I didn't really know at first, but I began to study and learn more about narcissism and toxic family dynamics. And I began to realize that, yes, this kind of thing goes on. You can get hooked up with a family that feels very threatened by you. And it's nothing to do with anything you did wrong. And they will weave you into their web, and they will fucking scapegoat you, and you will become the blame for everything. Sometimes people walk into a toxic snake pit of a family like that, and I believe that is what happened to Cindywatts. Absolutely. So, like I said, guys, probably here in the next few minutes, I'm going to wrap this one and try to get it up for you guys, and then get straight to work on the second part of it. We have a lot to cover. It's okay for us to use our intuition. We're not going to instantly like or approve of or warm to every person in this world. No. But in the circumstances of our grown children, or, you know, in a circumstance like that, where someone is bringing a new person into their life and they seem to really care for that person. In a normal family structure, even I, as a mother, if my son brings a new girl into his life, you know, in a normal family structure and circumstances, normal parents who actually love and respect their child, they're going to give that other person a chance. They're not going to sit there and act like an ass and immediately find things to dislike about them or judge about them, or they're just not going to act that way. Anybody with some sense, emotional intelligence, and love and respect for their grown child, they are going to try to see the beauty in that new person, and just like what their child sees, they're going to try to like that person, okay? There's nothing wrong with, well, you know, if there's a good reason not to like them. But in this case, no. In the cases where there's no reason given, and there's just an immediate type of vibe going on there, you can best bet you that's some toxic ass shit running deep in that family, okay? Most of the time. You have to remember, in this case, it's not about the grown children. It's not about love for her son. In this case, it's about Cindywatts. Everything in this case is about Cindy. Cindy, Cindy, Cindy. Me, my feelings, how Shanann hurt me. Oh, Shanann did this and Shanann did that. It's not about her son. It's never been about her son. I think that's her son's problem. Lifelong problem. Absolutely do. We're going to get more into it.